It's so funny, I was talking to the main guy there and he said, done some sketchy concrete pours in my life, and I just asked him, well, where does this one rank? And he's like, oh, top 5 for sure, top 5. So you can see all the steam coming off this. It was -8 this morning Celsius, so well below freezing. We designed these modular stay-in-place forms not knowing anything about concrete. We learned a lot along the way by messing a few things up, but this is a DIY method of forming up concrete that allows you to take care of all this work and potentially kill the stereotype that if you do something yourself, it's gonna be lesser quality, but a lower cost. In this instance, you might spend a bit more money on your forms, but your quality could potentially be even higher than hiring a professional to do this. So we're trying out 2 different ways to utilize these forms. This here is the thickened edge slab. So this is them double stacked, and that gives us a 12-inch thick edge here. And so when we're driving over this later with our really heavy forklifts, that is gonna withstand the weight of the equipment and hopefully not crack away our pad. But we're also utilizing a ton of rebar inside of this grid and also double layered inside of the forms here. So you can see we transition from 12 inches over to 6, or in this instance, about 8. And I'm kind of happy that we taper back, because that's pretty common in the concrete industry to do that. And actually a lot of times they'll go 24 inches in the thickened edge portion and then back to the thinner part of the pad. So here we got ourselves all of our 15M rebar and we ran it right through these holes, and then that props everything up very nicely. And this is the stronger rebar. We're only gonna go 10M, the north-south direction, and then that now is gonna sit on top of this, and hopefully everything stays nice and propped up, and we don't have to worry about the concrete contractor pretending like he lifts up our rebar grid. We know for a fact that this is gonna be inside of that slab. There was a ton of rivets in this massive slab, and so it felt very time consuming, but I've prepped other pads before with just traditional wood, and that took a week as well. So I think that this, especially for beginners, as long as the holes line up and you put a rivet in there, you know you're doing a good job. Where otherwise, potentially, if you're trying to come up with your own forms, well, what are forms made out of? Is it plywood? Is it spruce? Is that stuff straight? How should you pin it? How should you brace it? Depending on the height, what's the pressure of the concrete? All those questions takes a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience from a contractor that's been doing this for a long time. And so what I love about these is they just take all of that thinking right out of the system. And you can see here that they're webbed from stacking these 2 profiles, and that stops the sideways pressure and it really strengthens up this lighter gauge galvanized steel. And then these offset brackets here, we didn't really know what to do, and so we decided, hey, let's offset them from the bottom course to the top course, and potentially that gives them a bit more structure. There is even the option of this whole side piece to make it just 1 unit, but I'm not sure if that's gonna bow out because of the pressure. And potentially even with these, you can make them a single unit, but I'm not sure exactly how you get the rebar in there. So there's some options to play around with the design here, but all in all, I'm pretty happy with it. And if you didn't actually go through the expense of the thickened edge slab and you just stuck with the top portion of this, it really isn't that expensive and definitely does a lot of the thinking for you. We were able to install a 4-inch drain pipe right through the bottom portion of the forms and then come out the side here. And that allows our eaves troughs to run right underneath the pad and out where we have a bunch of aggregate right here. And then now this water can get into this coarse aggregate and run all the way to our property line, because we have a water issue here. Plus, we are in Canada and we have frost heave, which is a major problem. And so having our pad very aerated underneath there is going to stop water from collecting in there. And then in the wintertime, we know that water, when it turns to ice, expands. And so we really want to limit that with proper ventilation underneath our slab. We now have finished all of the east-west rebar. We've used 15M rebar there, and we've also laser cut some special profiles that keeps that perfectly 12 inches on center, and that really helps my OCD. The next step here is our north-south grid, and we're using 10M rebar this time. And one thing that's really cool is we have created a OCD comb. So this here has slots that defines our 12-inch on center rebar grid, and I can utilize this all the way down to make sure that everything's sitting super nice. Oh yeah, that's gonna make me happy. And so we just make sure that we get started on the right foot, and that's what our forms do. And one really cool feature here is that inside of these offset parts, we can slide the rebar right through, and now we're able to tie this 10M back to the 15M. Look at that. And this actually isn't sitting quite right because we had this drain pipe right here. And so I used the 2 higher portions. I skipped, I went from 12 on center to 6 and then back to 12, just so we could clear that because the pipe's actually not quite straight out of the slab. And that's putting a little bit of upward pressure on this, but that's all good. Once this is all tied together, she's gonna be mint. So here's something I just learned. I got a very traditional rebar tie. So we're gonna be bringing the automatic gun here right away to tie all this because this would take forever. But when I go to slide it through the slot, it doesn't quite fit. So one design change there, need to make that slot a little bit taller, and then we can utilize these instead of zip ties. I'm gonna tie a few of these and then I'm gonna set the staff loose on this project. So now that you guys have watched me struggle doing her the old school way, this is totally the way to do it. So to keep our rebar nice and straight and help my OCD, we added a few pieces right last minute and we didn't do much thinking. We screwed up and we actually made just a full circle that we'd have to slide the rebar through, and that is brutal to work with. So I see the guys, they just took an angle grinder and cut some grooves in them and dropped the rebar, and that seems to work. It did make it a little bit dangerous, but definitely something to go back to the drawing board on. And another huge issue is that our rebar, we accidentally put it like 2.5 inches up and then it was 3.5 inches down. So the height of the rebar grid should have been up, you know, a 1/2 inch to 1 inch. Then these also, depending on where the rock's at, obviously you can't get your aggregate perfect underneath here. So we had to block it up in certain places to really make sure that our rebar is in the middle of our slab. One thing you can see here is our height pins. So we actually just set string lines right across, and that's what these guys are gonna screed up to. Yeah, lots of things to learn here. Let's cover some more of them right now. So when we first got these parts, initially when we put the corners together, they could really get out of square or not 90 degrees. So we added a couple parts. On top here, there was some extra holes. So we created a gusset plate that riveted right in. And then we added another stiffener inside of the forms, and that really makes sure that your corners are nice and 90. This whole slab can kind of parallelogram on you, and you still need to kind of cross measure. But once you have it all built, it is pretty light, especially before you put any of this rebar in here, and you can shimmy things around. And we really did notice that when we put it up against the last concrete tradesman's work, because when you look down all the old concrete apron, it is just wobbling like crazy. And because we tied this right into the existing slab using that void form and then a urethane sealant, it's now following that. So one thing that is nice though is that at least the other side isn't chasing that. And when we look down that, I don't think we even ran a string line down. We just kind of eyeballed it, but holy crap, it's straight. And I'm also very excited to see that these forms aren't having too much pressure on the side and tipping over. Truck number 2, looks like the forms held up on the first one, but I haven't ran over there and looked down the line yet. I'm a little nervous too, but all in the name of research and development. Woo! Actually, that looks mint. Come check this out. We bought 120 stakes to go all the way down here, and it looks like they've only used them every 2.5 feet. And the concrete guy came here a couple days ago and he gave him a kick. He's like, oh yeah, that's solid. And they're holding up. So there's, 12 inches of pressure on the side of these forms and, sparingly staked. But I do feel that because it's got concrete on top of the other side of the form and it's gusseted back there, it's kind of like a retaining wall where you put your geotech right into the earth and that holds the retaining wall up. It's probably performing a similar way, and I'm not an engineer, I'm just an accountant, but it makes sense in my brain. It's so funny, I was talking to the main guy there and he said, done some sketchy concrete pours in my life, and I just asked him, well, where does this one rank? And he's like, oh, top 5 for sure, top 5. So you can see all the steam coming off this. It was -8 this morning Celsius, so well below freezing. And we got started real early. We should have probably waited another hour for the sun to come up, and at least we got that radiant heat, but they wanted to maybe cancel it. No, it is what, November 4th, 5th? We need to get going. We need to get this poured. Otherwise, we're waiting till April, May of next year. And yeah, it's all in the name of R&D. There might be a couple cracks because this pad's gonna freeze, but we do still have the option of tarping right off the building, opening these doors. We could heat it. We have frost fighters. But hopefully we got some warmer days coming up. We can let the sun really beat on this, and it really might not cure until springtime, but whatever. It's all mostly just surface cracks, and the pad will be there, and it should work for dragging containers across. So they've run the broom finish just over the first pass here, so about 4 feet, and we can see what the finish is going to look like. And I think that's pretty common. You probably want to learn more from concrete YouTube channels than me on how to finish the surface. So we've added 2% calcium to the mixture, and that ensures that this concrete hardens up faster. And it sure was steaming, and it was cold here this morning, and we were a little bit nervous, but now that the sun's out and that hardener is hardening, it's actually working out really well here. And so we are very confident that we're gonna get this finished nicely. And then the next worry is the next 7 days or so. So we're really gonna have to tarp all this off and make sure that we protect the slab in its curing process. The most important thing is the first 48 hours. And so potentially tomorrow, if the sun's out again, similar time of day, we might roll our insulated tarps back, really let that radiant heat that slab again, and then insulate that, and hopefully it can retain that heat throughout the night. At the beginning, when we designed these forms, we had rivet holes up at the top, and that was gonna be exposed in the finished product. And we thought, might look kind of ugly, or maybe we got to go put a bunch of rivets in there just to help our OCD. But one idea we had in the design is that once we go to vibrate this, the air is going to bleed out of those holes. And these guys verified that. They said when they were actually vibing it, they were paying attention until concrete squirted out of there. So you can see that it's pretty full. There might be a couple areas that we need to just go back with some urethane caulk or something and just completely fill that up. But worked out, I guess. Problem with filming in Canada this time of year is that we constantly have geese flying over. I think all the Americans, they just love that, and they're actually here right now hunting in our field. So it is springtime, all the snow is melted off of this pad, and it fared out quite well over winter. There's only one issue, and it's on the far north end. So this is the highest point in our yard, and the water slopes away down to the south. And we weren't able to excavate as much out here. And so we weren't able to put enough aggregate underneath this to allow it to handle the frost heave. And you can see right here, this is evidence of that. So it looks like on this end, we've come up a solid 2 inches. So this entire slab has jacked up from ice being under there, and the frost is still coming out now. It's the second nice day here in Canada, and hopefully this goes back down. But this issue was an issue previously with this shop, because we noticed on the concrete apron that went around the shop, the tin was all frost jacked from the previous winter. And so it happened again, and clearly it was an issue. Look at all this cracking. This is only 2 or 3 years old, and the apron's pretty much pooched here. And what probably would have been better is to jackhammer all of this and just bring this slab right back up to the building. But time was a definite constraint, as you could see earlier in the video, and we got it done. It's still so worth it though for us, because we now have this massive, 2,000 square foot place for us to work. And so we're gonna be able to do a ton of mods on here. And another thing we've dreamed up is potentially we can just line up a whole bunch of shipping containers, and those could be our inventory units or our mod part staging containers. So we're not exactly sure what we could do here. There is a property line right in between, and the local municipality doesn't really like us building right up next to that. But what would be sick is to go right off of the building with some sort of a lean-to or something, and have ourselves at least a roof over the winter where we could work outside out of the snow. So then here on the south end and all the way down up till about the last 20 feet there, everything's sitting nice here. So this is the exact same level that we poured this at. We wanted the radius of the old apron to just end right at the same level as this pad. And so this is what perfect looks like. And what you saw earlier, not so much. The moment we poured this, we covered this thing in tarps. And as soon as we took the tarps off, it snowed. So we didn't really get to see what the pad finished up like, or what these forms even really look like. And now that they've spent a winter and they've had a lot of moisture on them, and this galvanized steel has been reacting with the concrete, we can see what it looks like. So potentially over time, maybe this the zinc in it is gonna chalk or oxidize or something, and that actually kind of turns into a bit of a primer. And so sometimes when like a Quonset's been out in the weather for a long time and it's got a bit of a layer on it, like a grit, you can actually adhere paint to that now, and zinc is your best primer. And if we do get a film on here or something that we could apply paint to it, well then you could, you know, come with black or something and yeah, make this, spruce it up a little bit. And so one idea is because we can use our laser precision and we have these forms, what a lot of people like the idea of this is for walkout basements. So potentially we could build yourselves all your forms and your steps and maybe use a powder coated black, which I think would get real dirty and hard to clean. But that is definitely, I think, one of the worst things for concrete contractors. When someone gives them a call for a walkout basement, they're like, ugh. And maybe we could come up with a solution for that. But definitely in commercial and in industrial environments, all the rest of our pads everywhere are completely chipped off on this front leading edge. And I can see that this is gonna withstand us yanking containers over it, and also just our skid steers and our forklifts driving over it over time. I bet you any money it still looks like this squared off edge in 10 years. Alrighty, there you have it. This is quite a bit of a different flavor of video that you typically see on the Container Guys YouTube channel, but it was really fun for us to broaden our horizon and play around with some different trades like concrete. And we now have a better understanding of foundations, and we can take this method and make it different dimensions that match shipping containers. And being metal on the edges, now there is something that you can weld those containers down to that grounds them and also stops them from sliding off or blowing away in high winds or hurricanes. So if you enjoyed this and you want to see us play around with other things like roofs on top of shipping containers, that's what we're going to tackle next. And if you want to see that, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for notifications. And as always, check us out at tcg.ca. Hope you learned something.